Hello, everybody. It is me, Real American Politics, here today with another 2024 scenario. This scenario is Andrew Yang versus Nikki Haley. Now, I did this on Twitter, but I kind of had different opinions on it, and we're going to take a look at what the map would look like if it was Nikki Haley versus Andrew Yang. So, to start off with, the background is Joe Biden wins, and Republicans go back to being neocons. And within a month of Joe Biden's presidency, he resigns for mental health. So Kamala Harris becomes president, but there's a huge civil war in the Democratic Party, and Andrew Yang becomes a nominee because nobody hates him. Everybody hates each other, but they decide to go with Yang. Nikki Haley would be the nominee if Trump loses, because the neocons would have their way for this election cycle. And she would be the nominee right away. Mike Pence, I don't think, would run in this scenario. And yeah. So, this is 2024. It's a very interesting scenario. And yeah, we're going to start with the safe states. Where obviously the West Coast is safe Democrat. Hawaii is safe Democrat. Alaska is safe Republican. These are all safe. They're all safe Republican seats. Texas would be safe in this scenario. It's an establishment state, and with Nikki Haley being an established person, a neocon, she would fit right in to Texas. Missouri, Arkansas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama. These were obviously all stay Republican. South Carolina would probably trend 6 points with Nikki on the ballot. And for Andrew Yang, you would have Illinois, the establishment, Northeast, would be a little bit closer. Like states like Maryland, D.C., Delaware, which are more established states, they would trend Republican because Nikki Haley is on the ballot. It would do a lot better in the establishment states in the Northeast. But Yang would do better in places like Vermont, Massachusetts, Rhode Island, etc. New York, safe Republican. Maine's 1st District, safe Democrat, I should say. So, this is your battleground map. It is not good for Republicans, or Democrats, I should say. It's pretty much anybody's game. With Nikki Haley, she would do a lot better in places like Virginia, Colorado, in general the Northeast, and in the more established states. So, let's start from Nevada and move our way to the east. Nevada, I think, would go to Yang probably by 3 or 4 points. I think the union workers in Las Vegas, I think they would carry Yang over the edge. Probably by, like I said, 2 or 3 points. They don't like Bernie, but with Yang on the ticket, it would be a little bit different story. Yang would appeal better to union workers than Bernie could, I think. Because Bernie would not do well with union workers that have health care. And that's what Las Vegas has. A lot of unions that have their own health care plans they like. And they would not want to support someone like Bernie Sanders, but they would support someone like Yang who would not forcefully take it away. Montana, I think, would be safe. Likely Republican. It's one of those states where Nikki would do a little bit worse in the state as a whole, because Trump would do a lot better than Nikki ever could in that state. But the biggest reason for it is slowly becoming more Democrat, just ever so slightly, by like a half a point each cycle. But with Yang on the ballot, you could see the state being within 10. Arizona, I think, would be lean Republican. Nikki would probably win the state by 5 or 6. She's an establishment neocon, like I said. Same as Texas, she improves big time in Arizona. They like their establishment there for a lot of other reasons. Colorado, I think, would be lean Democrat in this scenario. You got a lot of neoliberals and neocons that live in the suburbs of Denver. And Nikki would do a lot better in places like El Paso County, which is where Colorado Springs is. She would do a lot better in the more establishment part of the state Republicans, but it would not be enough to flip it. New Mexico would go to Yang probably by a likely margin. It would not be close. It'd probably trend Democrat at the end of the day. Now we got Maine, Nebraska's 2nd District. Nebraska's 2nd District, I think Nikki Haley would win probably by half a point. It would be pretty tight, but End of the day, Nikki would just barely get over the edge in Nebraska's 2nd district. Iowa, I think, would be a lean Republican. The only reason Iowa would be a lean Republican is because of the fact that there is more Republicans in the state because of Trump. It is more Republican. But if it was still the purple state as it was, Yane would win the state by 4 or 5. But because of Nikki Haley being a Republican and Trump's gains in Iowa, she would just barely win the state by 3 or 4. Ohio would trend Democrat heavily. You would see the state within a point, but Nikki, again, like Iowa, would barely win the state because of the fact of Trump's gains in Ohio. She would do a lot worse in the southern part of the state. She would do a little bit better in the Cincinnati area, the more establishment part of the state for Republicans, the neocons. But at the end of the day, she would win the state by half a point. North Carolina, I think Nikki would win the state by 4 or 5. The biggest reason is because South Carolina. She's from South Carolina. She would have an appeal to North Carolina because, well, Carolina. It's because of the cross-state appeal, kind of like Vermont and New Hampshire. She would appeal to North Carolina most because she's from South Carolina. And I don't think Yane would do too well in North Carolina personally, but that's in my opinion. Georgia, I think, would be likely Republican. Nikki wins the state probably by 8 or 9. The biggest reason for this is just like Arizona, Texas, etc. It's an establishment state, and you have a lot of Republicans that won't vote for Trump, but certainly will vote for Nikki Haley. So yeah, it's a state like Arizona. It will probably trend Democrat, but if they pick a neocon forever, they're always going to do good in Georgia, Arizona, Texas. But again, Georgia is going to go Republican by a good enough margin because of Nikki Haley being a neocon. Now we got Florida. This is a state where it is trending slowly Republican. Ever so slightly Republican. And the biggest reason it would stay Republican is because Trump would still do really well in the Panhandle. Nikki would keep most of those gains because they're going to vote Republican no matter who in the Panhandle. And she would do a little bit better in Hillsborough. She probably wins a county in all likelihood. And do a little bit better in Jacksonville and Duval County. But it would be super close, and you could say it would go to Yane, but I personally think it would go to Nikki Haley by within a half a point. It would be very close. Virginia would be in a surprisingly close race. The establishment would not vote for Yane, I think, but Yane would just have enough of the northern suburbs to vote for him that Haley would not be able to get the state within a tilt margin. But it would be closer than it usually is. Democrats win the state probably by 4 or 5 with Yane versus Nikki, instead of the expected 7 or 8 in this timeline. But like I said, 5 would probably be the peak for Yane in Virginia. Probably realistically 3 or 4, because you're going against an establishment candidate and that sort of stuff. Now we got Pennsylvania. I think that's lean Democrat. Yane would do better with the Trump supporters in the state as a whole. And Nikki would only do better in the suburbs of Pennsylvania and Philadelphia and in Allegheny County. Michigan, I think, would be likely Democrat. Yane would have a universal appeal in Michigan. You know, he's a minority, so he appeals better to minorities than, Joe Biden could. He appeals to the union workers in Detroit and the Upper Peninsula, etc. Nikki really doesn't have an appeal there. So, yeah. Wisconsin, same deal. I think that would be likely Democrat. Yane has appeal to Trump's base, and he would do a lot better in the southern part of the state and the northern part. The only part Nikki would improve upon big time is the WOW counties, Milwaukee itself, Green Bay a little bit. And that's pretty much it. Minnesota, I think that'll be safe Democrat. I really don't know who Nikki would appeal to at all. She would appeal maybe to more of the people, the woke crowd, like the neocons and neoliberals that won't vote for Yane. But other than that, she can't win over Trump's base in Minnesota. Trump's base in Minnesota is basically populist. You need a populist Republican to win the state. New Hampshire, I think Yane would win the state by half a point. It would be another close race by a couple thousand votes, but Yane would win at the end of the day. And Yane would win this election by a surprisingly close margin. The reason it's going to be so tight is because Haley would have a better appeal to the Sun Belt, the establishment, and Yane would have only appeal basically to the Rust Belt, and Nevada to an extent. Nikki would probably win the 2nd district in Maine, probably by a lean margin. Extremely tight race. But Nikki would still win it, mostly because it is trending heavily Republican. Maine at large is probably safe Democrat in this scenario. And there we go. That is my 2024 prediction if it was Yane versus Nikki Haley. And like I said, the reason it's such a close race is because Nikki would improve big time in the Sun Belt, improve big time in the establishment states. She would just barely win Iowa, Ohio, and Florida, mostly because of Trump. And Yane would just have too much of appeal to the Rust Belt, I think, for Nikki to win. I have these videos where they have Yane winning by a landslide. I made a tweet about it, but I did more research and I realized, Yane would do a lot worse in places like Virginia, Arizona, Colorado, Georgia, Florida, etc. But yeah, this is my prediction, and I hope you guys enjoyed. If you did, hit the like button down below, subscribe, and hit that bell. And yeah, we'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.